Monday, August 21st, we are at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and Ohio State does not know, or at least has not disclosed, the identity of its starting quarterback. And if you take Ryan Day on face value, he says they have not made a decision between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. Saturday's second preseason scrimmage showed them good things, but did not show them a preponderance of good things in one direction for them to pick one guy. I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com, along with Andrew Gillis and Stephen Means. I'll start with you, Stephen. We did not learn the identity of the starting quarterback today. What did we learn about the quarterback situation that we didn't know before?
I think my main takeaway is the idea of playing two quarterbacks in a game is no longer this crazy concept. Ryan Day has been adamantly against it and really has only, engaged in it if someone has basically asked the question, would you play two quarterbacks? And it's just like, yeah. Today he went out there on his own. So I asked him about, he wouldn't go into how it would work because obviously they're not there yet, but I asked him the concept of if you have two quarterbacks, do you have none? Which is a thing. He just doesn't agree with it. He said, because then he brought up Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, which then he got asked which one would he start, and he wouldn't answer that one either. But I'm there now. I think both of these guys are going to play against Indiana, and it's flipped from because they can't choose because neither one of them has risen to the occasion. It's because both of them have proven that they're starter caliber, especially coming off that second scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots had Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady at the same time, and they didn't play them both at the same time. They picked one and waited until one got hurt to play Tom Brady, and the rest is history. Andrew, anything you learned today that you felt like you didn't know already?
Not that I didn't know already, besides the fact that there isn't a starter. I think that was news, but the thing that I keep kind of coming back to is that he alluded to it a little bit. There is an end date for this, right? It's just nefarious. There is an end time and end whatever you want to say where they're going to have a guy. He said today that he was a little bit surprised that no one has kind of taken this starting role at this point, or that no one has kind of been the guy that they were going to go to at this point. But, he kind of mentioned that he would be surprised if this goes on into the season. I think that's also his way of saying this can't go into the season. I've said for weeks kind of here and on the podcast, you have to have a guy by that Notre Dame game. You have to have somebody where you're like, this is the guy, this is who we're starting. You can't do that yo-yo back and forth, especially in a game of that magnitude that early in the season. Now, you need to have a guy for that game because you have a bye week the next week after that, and if you need to make a change, that is the ideal situation to do that. But the number one thing that I'm leaving today with is there's going to be a decision made. I would say, you're less than 2 weeks out from the Indiana game. You're probably within the next 2 weeks because I think that Indiana game is going to be really informative.
But the Notre Dame game is 4 games in.
Sure.
So there could be, he keeps talking about how everything they've done hasn't given them the data that they need to make the decision. Maybe it's that the first few games of the season in real game scenarios that gives them the data to make that decision.
But what are you going to learn after? So you play Indiana, and I understand they're 4 touchdown favorites, but it's a Big Ten opponent. It's on the road. It's the first game of the year. Then you play Youngstown State, and then you play Western Kentucky. And, I'm not necessarily sure that you are going to learn. If it is so close right now to where the coaching staff can't decide who's the starting quarterback, and you leave Indiana with that same thought, what are you going to learn against Youngstown State and Western Kentucky that you didn't learn against Indiana? I just don't know if there's I think you could learn something in the negative. If somebody goes out there against Youngstown State and doesn't play that well, doesn't play that crisp, or same thing with Western Kentucky. I know they're different opponents, but those are opponents that Ohio State should be winning by they should win that game by multiple touchdowns, both of those games. So I just don't know what you can realistically get from those situations that you can't get from a Big Ten game.
So I had to ask him today that the longer this goes on, there's this perception out there to the point where I think Joshua Perry said something somewhere about, hey, the longer this goes on, that's got to favor the young guy in Devin Brown. Doesn't the tie go to the young guy? I asked Ryan Day, what's the flaw in that logic? Why isn't that the case, that guy's the younger guy would have more ceiling to develop towards, right? And he flipped it. He said, no, in a tie, you would probably actually go with the older, more experienced guy, kind of saying, and there was a follow-up question from Bill Rabinowitz from the Dispatch saying, the kind of measuring the floor and the ceiling, and him saying, yes, you have to take into that into account. The ceiling is nice, but not at the extent that it might cost you a game as someone is reaching for that ceiling. Just kind of still made me think that if this really is tied and it goes to right down to the wire, it favors the older guy in Kyle McCord, the way Ryan Day is talking about it. But He also said twice during camp he thought someone was about to pull away with this job, and then it didn't happen. And he went up to them and said, hey, you almost had this, and the other guy caught up to you. And the way he said it made me think it wasn't the same guy both times, that there was a time when either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown was pulling away, and we're still here, August 21st, season opener on September 2nd, waiting to find out who that will be starting that game, and maybe both of them. We're going to talk a lot more about this on Buckeye Talk. And get the text 614-350-3315. We're pumping everything Ryan Day said to you as soon as he said it from Buckeye Talk.